I'm going to go ahead and go live in YouTube and record in WebEx. And the time is 7:02.
So do you want me to start?
Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, okay. So before calling the meeting to order, let me welcome everybody to our May 6th meeting of the Energy and Environment Commission. This meeting is being held electronically to comply with the Governor's Stay Safe Minnesota order and to ensure the safety of all residents and staff. All members of the EEC and staff are participating from their homes or offices. For members of the commission, please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking and raise your hand if you would like to speak. We will have roll call votes for each motion this evening, as well as for the adjournment. I will ask Staff Liaison Grace Hancom to call roll after each motion. Before we begin, there are a few things I'd like to cover for those listening in or watching online. There is no community comments during the meeting tonight. However, the city is committed to hearing and receiving your inputs on matter. So you can send in comments to the City Council or the EEC through the Council Correspondence web form on the city website. The recording of the meeting will also be available to watch on the city website tomorrow. Thanks in advance for your patience as we work to conduct this meeting online. Thank you to everyone turning in tonight for your interest in the EEC and our work with the city. So Grace, I don't know if you can help me with the roll call.
Yes. Commissioner DeCane. Commissioner Haugen.
Here.
Commissioner Haran.
Here.
Commissioner Hovanek. Commissioner Lanzis.
Here.
Commissioner Lukens.
Here.
Chair Martinez.
Here.
Commissioner Rattan. Commissioner Tessman.
Here.
Commissioner Mans. And Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
Roll call is complete.
Okay, thank you, Grace. So item number 3 of the agenda is the approval of the meeting agenda. So does anybody has comments or suggestions for the meeting agenda? If nobody has any comments, can we move anybody votes to moving the agenda forward?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so can you do the roll call, Grace? I think it was moved by Tom and second by Michelle.
Yes. Commissioner DeCane. Haugen.
Aye.
Commissioner Haran.
Aye.
Commissioner Hovanek. And let me know, I see Terry, you joined us, but let me know if you are unable to speak. Just feel free to chat here. Okay, she is giving the thumbs up. Commissioner Lanzis.
Aye.
Commissioner Lukens.
Yep. Aye.
Chair Martinez.
Aye.
Commissioner Tessman.
Aye.
And that is it.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Our next item is item number 4, which has to do with the approval of the meeting minutes of our last meeting on April 8th, 2021. So does anybody has comments or suggestions for the minutes? Okay, if nobody has any comments, should we move the minutes forward? I'll move the minutes.
Seconded.
Okay, so Grace, can you help us with the roll call?
Yes, and can you just identify who seconded that motion?
I think it was
John
Was it
Haugen.
John?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Commissioner Haugen.
Aye.
Commissioner Haran.
Aye.
Commissioner Hovanek. I'm looking at you. Feel free to give a thumbs up. Great. Commissioner Lanzis,
Aye.
Commissioner Lukens,
Aye.
Chair Martinez,
Aye.
and Commissioner Tessman.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, Grace. So in section number 5, we have special recognitions and presentations. So today we have 2 presentations. The first one is regarding the Climate Action Plan Baseline Assessment, which is currently being developed by the Pale Blue Dot. So Ted Redmond is going to present the assessment. And then it will follow a presentation by MJ Lemon, which is going to present some information regarding the board and commission members review. So Ted, I see you that you're here, so the floor is yours. Just before you start, we have 45 minutes for this presentation. So if you can do the presentation in 20-25 minutes so we can have some time for questions and answers, we'll appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll work. Thank you very much, and I'll work to do that. All right, let me pull up my presentation. Oops. Well, this is okay, because then if there's any questions, there we go. All right. So what I thought we would hit today is certainly to give you a sense of the baseline assessment, but really kind of an update on where we're at. So kind of our schedule process to date, a review, high-level review of the existing conditions documents, then a high-level review of the baseline and draft strategic goals, and then kind of a next steps where we're going from here. So if that sounds okay, our schedule. So far we have accomplished a number of things. We've done the project kickoff, the supporting community partner outreach, existing conditions documentation and assessment, and we've begun the community engagement. So really kind of to date, we've been focusing on data collection and documentation. And where we're going from here is then beginning to develop a draft plan. I'm sorry, I always struggle with these different, there we go. Zoom versus WebEx, I get confused as to how to get stuff out of my way so I can see what I've got on the screen. I'm sorry about that. All right, so today we wanted to talk a little bit about the existing condition documentation and assessments. First, just a kind of an overview of the intent of these documents. These are process documents, so they're not the final climate action plan by any means. They're putting together, we put them together to provide as much background as possible in terms of data that can then give a basis for the exploration and development of goal setting and strategies and actions. So there are 4 sort of existing conditions documents. They're the vulnerability assessment, greenhouse gas inventory, tree survey, and renewable energy potential study. All 4 of those kind of get summarized and then stuffed into the climate action baseline assessment and strategic goal recommendations document. So the first 4 are just sort of a broad range of background data. And then really the climate action baseline assessment is where we start to test out what might be potential strategic goals. So looking at the, these are supposed to build up, I'm sorry about that. So looking at the climate vulnerability assessment, we have, I'm just going to skip through all this. The climate vulnerability assessment has a background of sort of climate change in the Midwest, climate change in the state of Minnesota, climate change in Edina or Hennepin County specifically. Then we also do an overview of the potential vulnerabilities or potential impacts that climate change, current and future projected climate change may have. We then look at some of the indicators of sensitivity or resilience within the community. And then we actually look at mapping out the vulnerable populations throughout the community on a census tract by census tract basis and kind of collect demographics for each of the potentially vulnerable populations. So these are population groups that are potentially more vulnerable than average population. Everybody has vulnerabilities. If my house is in a floodplain and it floods, I'm vulnerable to flooding. So we all have vulnerabilities for certain. There are just demographics, portions of our community that may have a heightened sensitivity to certain vulnerabilities. Groups like those that are in economic stress, people of color, seniors, older adults over 65, etc. So we've mapped out all those vulnerable populations. And then from that, we can then sort of summarize where all that background information we can summarize into where our potential greater vulnerabilities might be within the community. So with that, just sort of summarizing what we found there, looking back over the last 30, 40 years, we've seen an increase in average annual temperature of about 1.6 degrees. An increase in annual precipitation, an increase in heavy precipitation, an increase in days over 95, and a decrease in days below freezing, as we might expect. Also, over the last 20 years, we've seen an increase of about 8% of storm weather or extreme weather events as recorded by NOAA. And within Hennepin County as a whole, we average about $21 million worth of damage annually from extreme weather events, and 0.3 of an individual death. That's a goofy number, but that means over the span of 20 years, we have about one or two deaths that have been recorded. Looking forward, by the end of this century, in Edina, we can expect an annual increase in average temperature of 6 to 12 degrees, and that range depends on what happens with our emissions here globally. We can anticipate annual increase to increase in variability. All the models agree on that. And then depending on what happens with our emissions, we may see either a decrease in total annual precipitation or an increase in total annual precipitation. Regardless, though, all the models also show an increase in heavy precipitation, an increase in days above 95, up to 50 additional days a year above 95 degrees, a decrease of days below freezing of at least 45, and a commensurate increase in the growing season. So based on the assessment and mapping out of our vulnerable populations, we can see that our prioritized potential impacts, the things that we are perhaps most sensitive to in Edina, would be extreme weather and heat, air quality impacts, flood potential and impacts, food insecurity, and power failure. Our largest vulnerable populations are older adults 65 and over, people of color, and those in economic stress. And that map to the right there indicates sort of the composite vulnerabilities by census tract by census tract. So those portions that are darker purple here are higher levels of vulnerable instances of vulnerable populations. So we can use that information to kind of zero in if we want to prioritize on actions. We can do that. The next document we put together was the greenhouse gas inventory. That document has an overview, sort of a general introduction into greenhouse gas inventories, an overview of the findings in brief for our emissions, comparison against other communities. How do we stack up with other communities in Minnesota as well as the larger region? A greenhouse gas emission forecast. So this is a business as usual forecast. If we do not do anything, what happens to what potentially happens to our emissions in the coming decades? And so sort of summarizing what we found there, Looking at the 6-year trend, we did 3 years of emissions, 2013, 2016, and 2019. Over those 6-year timeframes, we've seen a slight decrease in our emissions, just a little under 1.5% in emissions. Over that same period of time, we've seen about an 8% increase in population. We've seen our GDP, our economy, grow about, I think that's 26%. I'm sorry, that's a really horrible blue there. And we've seen employment, though, decrease about 13%. So GDP's gone up, employment inside the city has gone down. So what that illustrates is we've seen a GDP change, an increase in GDP, while we have seen a slight decrease, at least, in greenhouse gas emissions. And to kind of give you a sense of what the annual emission volume is, greenhouse gas emissions are volumes of man-made atmosphere. So every year we're looking at about 14.1 billion cubic feet of greenhouse gas emissions annually. The diagram on the bottom there, the chart on the bottom illustrates I'm sorry, that's greenhouse gas reductions. I'm sorry about that. That's the wrong chart. But we've in the greenhouse gas inventory, we do break down the emissions by sector. Our building sector is the largest, transportation sector is very close behind it. And then waste management and water and wastewater kind of bring up the smaller portions. They are much smaller contributors, but those 4 categories are our emission sectors. So the next background document we've put together is the ground cover and tree canopy assessment. This document, has some background related to trees and their roles in climate action and climate vulnerabilities. We've then assessed the characteristics of land coverage throughout the city, tree canopy, lawn and grass coverage, open water, light impervious surfaces, and dark impervious surfaces, all we've mapped out on a census tract by census tract basis. Looked at land cover impacts and benefits, looked at the economic value of the tree canopy in the community. Again, all of these are broken down by census tract. And then I summarized findings in the report. With all of that background information, we've then also illustrated potential long-term 10, 20-year canopy increase goals and what it might take to get there, with the intent of illustrating literally how many trees will we need to plant in order to reach a particular goal, so that we can arrange that goal to be whatever we want, and we do have a sense as to what it will take to get to that goal. So summarizing some of the findings here, our tree canopy is a hair under 36%. Our grass coverage is just a hair over 27%. And then our dark impervious is about 25.5%, and our light impervious surfaces are a little over 6%. If we look at how those land covers break down census tract by census tract basis, these census tracts are stacked in order of those that have the highest share of low to moderate income households, down to those that have the least number of low to moderate income households. And you can see those trend lines, that those census tracts that have higher shares of low to moderate income individuals have the least amount of tree cover and the greatest amount of dark impervious surfaces in general, but certainly dark impervious surfaces. So dark impervious surfaces, we certainly pay attention to because it creates micro heat island impacts. So as we get increasing temperatures and increasing nighttime temperatures, micro heat islands will exacerbate that experience. And then just breaking down a little bit further, the impervious surfaces throughout the community. Dark impervious surfaces are half of all of our impervious surfaces. That illustrates that we have a lot of potential opportunity to address heat island impacts by just addressing that dark impervious, which means we could make less impervious surfaces, or we can take that dark impervious and make it light impervious, do green roofs, those sorts of things, and those strategies can help us reduce our heat island impacts. The grass coverage also, I'll just point out that the overwhelming majority, 93%, is manicured lawn, with about 7% being wild flower, prairie grass, or garden type space. So with that background information, we've been able to identify, illustrate a potential weighted priority for tree canopy increase. And that weighted priority takes into account the potential for new trees, which is based on how much space is available for trees to go in. Population density, therefore, where can we put trees that will give the greatest benefit to the greatest number of people? Also, the low-income population, those sectors that have higher shares of low-income folks, and then overall heat island mitigation needs. So those portions of our community that have highest ground coverage, hard impervious surfaces that are creating micro heat island, kind of weighting those. And with those potential weighted priorities, we also then illustrate a potential planting goal in order to achieve an increase in tree canopy. And again, this is just a starting point. This illustrates that if we were to target increasing from 36% tree canopy to 40% tree canopy by 2040, this illustrates how many trees would need to be planted per year in order to achieve that. And the map illustrates literally how many trees in each census tract in order to achieve that census tract's sub-goal. So the intent here is just that as we discuss the potential for tree canopy, we have a way of helping to actually guide the city in terms of how you might prioritize where trees go. We've also generated a renewable energy potential study. That study looked at renewable energy throughout Minnesota, renewable energy within Edina, and then also explored the potential adoption scenarios for sort of market adoption for solar moving forward. We also looked at the potential for a plasma gasification, which is a zero emission waste to energy scenario that can help create things like hydrogen or biodiesel that can help transition transportation systems to zero emission. And all of these baseline documents, we've also created 4 infographics that tend to summarize some of those findings that we've just made available to help communicate different aspects of climate change, the community's climate vulnerabilities, the greenhouse gas inventory information, all that available through infographics to share with the community. So as I indicated, that data then has been summarized and put into the baseline document and draft strategic goal document. This document is really where we start to sort of frame potential opportunities, and it's the basis for beginning to work with the planning team. The strategic draft recommendations are just a starting point. So they're not intended to be the end of a conversation. They're just intended to be a place to begin a conversation and create dialogue within the team. So that document has, introduction overview, each sector of climate action for both mitigation and adaptation. Each sector has a couple pages worth of background summary of information related to the community and some of the data that has been developed. And each sector then has draft strategic goals. And again, the intent here is just to outline potentials that then the planning team can use as a place to start the conversation, discuss, debate, pitch out ideas, create new ideas, and come to a consensus on what really we want to have for the final goals for the plan. Just kind of giving you a high-level overview of each sector. So in transportation and land use, we've got recommendations for community-wide as well as municipal operations. The recommendations include reduction pathways. So those are things like decreasing vehicle miles traveled community-wide, increasing public transit, increasing the density of population per acre, which helps us decrease vehicle usage and increase walking, for instance. We also include fuel switching, which are things like switching to electric vehicles or establishing biodiesel or biosources instead of fossil fuel sources. The buildings and energy sector, again, we have reduction pathway suggestions, which include things like increasing energy efficiency, so reducing how much energy we're consuming right out of the chute, increasing the share of population, decreasing the share of population living in high energy poverty. Strategies which look at fuel switching, like increasing renewable energy throughout the community, and increasing the fuel switching of burning fossil fuels, fuel switching from fossil fuel burning on site to electrification, which helps us avoid emissions at building sites. Within waste management, we have reduction goals associated with reducing total municipal solid waste, increasing or achieving organics landfill diversion, which is one of the largest categories of emissions associated with waste. So addressing organics is very important. Increasing recycling, and increasing diversion of potential recoverables. So these are materials that could be used elsewhere. Some construction materials, for instance, fall into that category. Within our water and wastewater sector, we have reduction goals, potential reduction goals, which are increasing water conservation, so reducing how much water we're using, reducing wastewater generation, and mitigating the potential of increased flood hazards, and updating design standards to meet the projected future climate change impacts. So making sure that our plans look forward, not just backwards, as we've been used to doing over the last number of decades. That's how we've been planning just culturally, and we need to shift towards making sure we're looking forward for impacts. Green space and trees, we have recommended potential goal for increasing tree canopy, increasing pollinator supportiveness of lawns and grasslands. So looking to replace lawn, for instance, into pollinator-friendly ground coverings, reducing heat island effect through reducing dark impervious surfaces citywide, and looking to reduce, repurpose, and reimagine lawn space, which can help us with a number of things, reducing emissions associated with mowing lawns, for instance, as well as increasing water retention and building soil carbon. All can happen when we switch from lawn to prairie grass or other forms. Our climate health and safety, we have recommended strategies related to improving community-wide resilience to climate impacts. And within the climate economy, we have then potential goals related to capturing some of the benefit, the economic benefit of climate action, as well as increasing workforce development, building marketplace climate resilience, and establishing sustainable financing for the city's climate action activities. So all of those strategic goals then, potential, I should say, strategic goals within each sector, we have illustrated a preliminary modeling of what those potential strategic goals could result in as far as total emissions reductions. So if those were the strategic goals, they would result in a total reduction of 30% over 2013 numbers by 2030. So again, the intent here is just to give us a starting point. The actual strategic goals that the planning team ultimately lands on can be different. This just helps us understand, well, if these goals get us to this level, as we make changes in each sector, we'll have a place to start in terms of how that may impact where we could end up by 2030. So with that, we have just a starting point on an overall goal for the overall climate action plan, which is to reduce community-wide GHG emissions by 25% below 2013 levels by 2025, 30% by 2030, and 80% by 2050. And again, this is just a draft as a place for the planning team to start. So our next steps are to begin the collaborative planning process with the multi-stakeholder planning team. We're organizing ourselves into sub-teams based on climate action plan sector. We are going to determine CAP goals, strategies, and then detailed actions on how to address those strategies through workshop sessions that are going to extend out through September. We are also involved in community engagement. We're doing listening sessions in the community. We have an online survey that's active on the Better Together Edina website. We're also doing youth engagement, which consists of a youth input survey, as well as a climate action youth storytelling initiative, which is an opportunity for youth of all ages to sort of envision a future that addresses climate action and share some of their ideas about how we might get to that point. And all of that community engagement will be summarized and provided into the climate action planning team right there in the middle of the process. So that engagement will be fed directly into the planning process with the team. So with that, I'd love to just open up to questions and see if I can answer anything that you have.
So does anybody has any questions for Ted?
I have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tom, go
hi, Ted.
ahead. Okay, sorry, Kasha, go ahead.
Yes, I do have a quick question for you. So in the public engagement, I was wondering if the city was able to kind of offer a stipend or gift cards to participants, some of them, especially those who are from the communities of color, to compensate their time in this kind of economic uncertainty, where being available for a conversation like that will mean a lot to them when they're working like different kind of hours or shift. The other day I was working with, what was her name, in recruitment, kind of finding people who will be potential, and most of the people, they're like, oh, I work at that time, I'm kind of finding my way and I want to be involved and all that. So is the city in that position of, you know, like compensating people for those time?
That's a superb question, and I have to tell you that my brain is slightly dead on that topic, only because we had originally talked about that, and then we had conversations related to what the right approach was, and our engagement partner Huda was leading that dialogue with the city, and frankly, I am not certain where it ended up. Grace, do you happen to know how that resolved itself? That discussion?
Yes. So we recruited the climate planning team from a variety of groups. And so Huda Ahmed, who Ted just mentioned, was specifically focused on residents who represented those groups of people most vulnerable to climate change. Over a lot of overlap with the groups that you're describing, Ukasha. Those participants in our climate action planning team are being offered compensation through gift cards, like Visa gift cards, for their time on the planning team. So yes, that is part of the conversation, but thank you for bringing it up.
Oh yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Okay, Ted, I think you had Tom, you have a question, right?
Yeah, I have a question. Hi, Ted. So in that second section that you were talking about, I was really intrigued by the map that kind of showed the opportunity for your tree planting, your tree canopy work based on the different shades of green. And you started to answer my question when you got into the third section, but I'm curious, are those different areas of the city, like what can we impact? Are those all like public lands or parks? I mean, for example, I was just reading this morning, the city had a big event yesterday in Arden Park. I think Hennepin County went in there and they rerouted the creek and they planted like 400 trees. So I was curious, when you're talking initially, like, is it just in public land where you can do the work? And then in the third section, you actually had some ideas and potential ways for residential application of maybe might be trees, or it might be something completely different when it comes to how you maintain yards and alternative yard landscape. So just curious, could you talk a little bit about the land you can actually impact?
Absolutely, that's a fantastic question, and I would say if I can, I would take that same question and I can say that we could apply it to all sectors. So whether we're talking about buildings and energy or transportation or ground cover, health and safety, all of these sectors, as a community-wide climate action plan, as this plan will be, we will be looking to address both what can the city do on city land, on city buildings, on city operations to reduce emissions, but also having goals that are community-wide in nature. And so because of that, we want to see evolution occurring on within the private sector as well as the public sector. So the goals that we ultimately will end up with, the preliminary strategic goals are community-wide. We also have some municipal goals, but whatever those ultimately become, the final goals that the team create, those want to address both public sector as well as private sector. And so when it comes to how do we achieve that, a climate action plan, typically we're going to find that the detailed actions that go in to support those strategic goals. So we want to increase renewable energy. We want to increase, tree canopy, what have you. We will find that there are typically 4 types of actions that can go into that. And the greatest number of those actions are things like advocating, so providing education and information to folks. Some folks, they may just not realize that there are other options or what the advantages of other options are. So trying to get that kind of communication out there. So influencing through education and advocacy. We also have the opportunity to do example projects, taking projects that the city can do on their own land, on their own operations, and illustrate as case studies what can happen if you do these things. How can that create benefit for you as a business owner or a resident, etc. And we can also incentivize. And of course, incentives, usually when we hear the word incentive, we think money, and it certainly can be that. We could say, plant a tree, I'll pay you $100 or whatever, right? I mean, so that's, you can incentivize with actual dollars, but you can also incentivize through making something easier, through making my life easier. If I'm developing a piece of property, for instance, there's also all sorts of simple kind of horse trading things that we can do that a developer can see as advantageous to their process, that could then say, well, actually, then I will do these things because I prefer to do those things, and you've just made my life easier over here, so I can do those things. So there is opportunities to incentivize that way as well. And then the 4th category is, of course, requirements. And requirements can be, of course, they can be very strong requirements, very strong thou shalt kinds of requirements, but there can also be more encouraging or influencing requirements. A good example of that would be a process that simply requires you to provide some information to the city when you are developing your land. What we're really trying to do is we're trying to get the landowner and the developer to explore, for instance, renewable energy. So we just want to know that you've looked at it and you understand the payback that you could have. And that's really a low-level requirement that could be actually have a lot of benefit because it could turn people on to understanding their ROI on that sort of thing. So there will be opportunities for us to help encourage or motivate or show folks how to create better use on their own properties and within their own operations.
Perfect. Very good. Thank you.
And I know the city's been giving out trees recently. Is that part of this, Grace? Kind of one of the initiatives? Is that all related or no? Okay.
No, I'll just mention that that is part of the benefit, though, of a climate action plan is to more strategically synthesize our activities. But yeah, we've had a tree and an Edina compost giveaway this week.
Okay. Ted, I did have a question. I was reading through the cover survey and sequestration study that was in the attachments. There's a lot of talk in there about city average, and I think the city averages were based on the different neighborhoods and areas within the city. But can you talk to, I know from a Pale Blue Dot perspective, you guys have worked with a number of the other suburbs in this area. Can you talk to kind of where we're leaders and laggards against some of the other cities on some of these things? Because my hope is we're leaders on a number of them, but are there certain areas that jump out at you as things we really need to catch up on?
Now, and are you thinking, are you asking that specific to ground cover and tree canopy sorts of things, or
yeah, across the board? I mean, just kind of across the board. There are a lot of things like on the tree canopy and grass coverage. You know, the charts were green, so that led me to kind of believe we were relatively good. And then other areas with Heat Island, it was red. So I didn't know if that meant it's red, but everyone else is redder, or are we like how that kind of shapes up in comparison to some other suburbs?
I would. That's a great question. Related to the ground cover study. So I don't have hard fast numbers for comparables right now, but generalizing, Edina has pretty good tree canopy coverage. You know, there are other communities that are, I think, a little bit stronger, as you'd expect, right? There's going to be others that are a little bit stronger, but I would say in general within the metro area, you would be in the the upper percentiles. I don't know if I'd want to give you a number exactly, but maybe in the upper 40 percentile for certain, if not higher, just to kind of be general. You do also have a higher proportionate amount of dark impervious surfaces, which is also then driving, I think, a higher than average potential for micro heat island. And that's to be anticipated as, a community that's whatever we're second ring, first ring suburb. That's not uncommon to expect, but I'd say if we average it out, that's probably true. When it comes to like the grass and prairie grass sort of coverage, frankly, there isn't a lot of great data that I've seen on that with other communities. We tend to break that out because I think that's important for us to explore, but most assessments do not. So that's a little bit harder for us to compare. So that would just be maybe intuitive, but not scientific at all. So I would say it isn't that, your ground cover, the assessment for the ground cover is not going to say that Edina is failing in any way, right? I mean, you've got good tree canopy coverage. You clearly there's action trying to deal with impervious surfaces very sensitively. So it's not like Edina is doing poorly in any of those things. I think the takeaway, though, is that there is a pretty clear message related to equity of these opportunities and these impacts, and that those equity considerations overlap pretty tightly with individuals that are perhaps have a higher sensitivity to climate vulnerabilities. And so that's perhaps where our greatest opportunities could be as a community, is how can we both contribute to decreasing our micro heat island community-wide, increasing our tree canopy coverage because that gives us benefits throughout, but also doing that in a way that can try to enhance equity, which will help also to address some of the climate vulnerabilities that we're most sensitive to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And when you talk about these potential goals, is there like one that jumps out to you as this would be the highest value thing we could accomplish the soonest?
Within the ground cover section, I would honestly, if I were to prioritize any of them, I would prioritize the micro heat island considerations. So addressing impervious surfaces in general, but definitely dark impervious surfaces. And then I think followed up right behind that, exploring, addressing grass and how can effective, attractive, appropriate grass covering transition from manicured lawn to other forms that can help increase dealing with stormwater management, which is going to be a continuing issue and an advancing issue for us in the future. So addressing potentials related to lawns, versus prairie grasses and those sorts of things.
Okay.
Not to say that trees aren't important, and then trees, I would you got to prioritize. I love trees. Trees are awesome. Within the trees, I think prioritizing canopy cover where it can help the heat island, which is, can we cover parking lots with some tree canopy? Can we, put more trees on sidewalks that don't have them, or in front of apartment buildings that don't have, those kinds of strategies can help with that heat island mitigation. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
I'll just
Anybody else?
mention, sorry,
Oh, sorry.
Hilda, I'll just
Go ahead.
mention briefly, if you all are interested in inner city comparisons, I just put a resource in the chat, Regional Indicators Initiative, which measures energy, travel, waste emissions. So you can take a look at that just to get an idea to your question, Corey.
Thank you, Grace. Anybody else that has any questions? I
I have
Terry.
one question.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Ted, can you talk a little bit more about the gasification project? Are you recommending a new site or a new plant in Edina that is, plasma gasification of our municipal waste, or is there some nuance there that I'm missing?
At this point, it's just we've thrown it out there as like a topic for discussion. It's kind of like the old Saturday Night Live, here's a topic, discuss. And it could be that it's not appropriate, ultimately potential for the community. It could be that we, as a group, everybody decides, this is something to explore, in which case a next step related to that would be exploring the potential and how might it best be accomplished. And through that, it could be something that's accomplished within the existing transfer stations and landfill sort of sites that exist, but maybe the community ends up sponsoring a dialogue with Hennepin County and others about how might this be a strategy that can help benefit certainly Edina, but also other communities. Or it could be that it is a potential that is within the city of Edina, that diversion of organic waste, for instance, which, by the way, is a great feedstock for these systems. When you use organics, food waste, and so forth, basically the byproducts of the plasma gasification, there are two byproducts. One is a syngas, which can be, it can come out as like a biodiesel, or it can come out as like a hydrogen. So you can use it for transportation fuels. And then the other byproduct is biochar, which is a soil amendment that actually increases the amount of carbon sequestration that can happen in the soil. So it's kind of a range of potential. And as a detailed, ultimately out of the climate action plan, I think if the group wants to explore that in detail, that's awesome. But I would tend to suggest that for this kind of climate action plan, just exploring, is it something worth looking at into the future? And then that could become a detailed action that says, do a study. Let's find some partners like the county and so forth and do a study.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Terry, do you have questions? We can't listen to you.
Oh, you can't hear me on this phone?
Yes.
You can or no?
No, we can.
Okay, I'm using my cell phone to call in and then using my computer for the video. I'll get it as soon as they put us back in person. I'm wondering if you can explain to me a little bit about dark versus light impervious surfaces. I'm assuming dark is like asphalt pavement and light would be a structure. Is that correct?
Close. And so light would be, it's literally, if you look at a surface and if your eye thinks of it as light, so a high albedo versus a low albedo, that's really what we're looking at. So it can be both at the ground level as well as at the rooftop level. So for instance, think of like a built-up roof that's like a black tar kind of look to it. That's a dark impervious surface. Or a white membrane roof would be a light impervious surface. So, and at the ground, it'd be asphalt versus concrete, for instance.
Okay. Okay. So it's just basically color. And then my other question was, and I'm kind of digging down a little bit deeper into the stormwater stuff, probably than you want to, but was there anything taken into consideration in your work to kind of figure out increases in square footage coverage in the city of Edina in the last 10 years? Because I know that there's, a lot of discussion within Edina when you take a 1,200 square foot home, tear it down, remove the trees, and then you're building a 3,500 square foot home. There are no trees. Was that kind of taken into your assessment at all? That increase in the square footage of actual structure coverage?
No, it was not. The ground cover was a snapshot in time. So we've not done multiple years. We've done where are we today, or today I think probably the aerials are 2019, but today.
Got it. Okay, and I'm just kind of wondering, just for a bigger purpose, if we're looking at the stormwater management, and a lot of people are complaining about wet basements, and I'm trying to figure out what part of that wet basement has to do with what we're looking at it with climate change versus what is contributed by just the city of Edina changing its way we're living. So anyway.
And if I may, that's a fantastic question, and it could be both. I think that we can absolutely feel comfortable saying that we should be anticipating it to become more aggressive in the future with climate change. That maybe wonderful things come to pass and we don't have increasing heavy precipitation, but we can anticipate that now. So we can definitely assume that. And then what I would suggest is that, clearly Edina's had evolution and, for instance, the increased density in certain portions of the community is from a climate perspective, climate action perspective, actually a positive thing. Denser community portions can have a better use of public transit, for instance, and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But clearly it also comes with other aspects. And so it could be that we inform, that the city takes some of this information and informs the process about how might we encourage those developments to continue to advance strategies that decrease impervious surfaces, increase stormwater management, increase cooling, and so forth.
Okay.
So that's ultimately, I think, where some of the detailed actions can go, is how might we encourage those evolutions.
Okay.
Okay. So we've been here 45 minutes. So does anybody else have any more questions or? Okay, Bayardo.
I just have one concern, and maybe I'm just thinking about it wrong, but is it the best course of action to provide, some type, whatever form of payment to volunteers? Will that give you, will that give proper results as like or biased opinions or biased results on the study? I'm just not thinking that would be a great idea.
If I may, from my perspective, I will say that with all sorts of planning efforts, certainly, but in particular with climate action plans, it's very common for communities typically want to make sure that we get broad input, as broad as possible. And frankly, broad input is very challenging to do, as we all know. It's difficult to get input from all sorts of different people for all sorts of different reasons. So we typically, communities do want to try everything that they can to broaden input. The reasons for that are certainly that ultimately we're looking to influence private behavior. So not just what the city can do, but also we're trying to get, what can I do at home kind of a thing as well. So we want to make sure we touch as many people as possible to get that input. And also because of the vulnerabilities and how different portions of our populations have different weighted potential vulnerabilities to climate change impacts, as well as potential benefit that can be had through some of the actions. So for all those reasons, trying to make sure that there's a broad range of input is usually an important goal for communities. And the city of Edina made it clear that, that is an important goal for the city. And with that as background, I will say that it's very common within climate action planning to try to provide some form of a compensation for individuals that otherwise would not be able to participate. And we have not found that it doesn't influence the input that they're providing. That individuals that might receive some support for participating, it doesn't influence the responses that they give or the input, the kind of input that they give. It only influences the ability to make sure that we're getting input from those sectors of our population, if that makes sense. So it ultimately improves, it changes the kind of input we get because it broadens the ability to get input from a broader stakeholder group. So it does create change in terms of input, but it isn't that, typically cities aren't saying, if you give us certain answers, we're going to give you a pass, a card to the grocery store. I mean, we're not looking for a certain kind of input. We're just looking for their input, right? So I've not seen that it creates, it doesn't influence their input at all that I've seen. It just enables their ability to participate.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Just before, I have a question, and I think I know we are over time, but I know this is the starting point. It's not where we want to reach. I'm just wondering, why did you choose your the 2013 as your baseline? Since all the baselines goals that Minnesota has is 2005, and even Hennepin County, they did cheat a little bit because they put 2010. So I'm not very supportive of that baseline year, because eventually that will affect your mitigation potential.
Well, yes and no. So baselines are always kind of a difficult thing to decide what is the right baseline for a community. And so the specific answer why it isn't 2005, it's because we don't have 2005 baseline data. And so we could take what's available and backcast it, but essentially that's an educated guess as to what would the community's emissions have been in 2005. And because it would be backcasting as opposed to getting raw energy consumption data and so forth, it means it would have a higher degree of variability to it. It may be less accurate. So I typically suggest that when establishing a baseline year, to try to do it with a year where we have raw consumption data available, so that we can feel pretty good about the accuracy of that data. So then the second consideration is, just sort of how might that help you to establish a specific goal and give you a tool to measure yourself along the way. And that end goal, we can translate back and forth in order to establish that end goal and know that we're kind of in the realm of where we want to be. And so there's two ways that we can educate ourselves about where might we want to be. One is, do we want to align with the state or not? And so we can do some quantifications to sort of estimate where we may have been in 2005, as well as where is the state right now and where are we at right now and where does the state need to get to by 2030 or 2040 or 2050, and align with that. And we can also look at IPCC recommended goals, which are global, and we can use our 2019 data to also compare against that. So we can still sort of navigate against the statewide goals as well as IPCC goals or any other goal that we want to use. It takes a little initial sort of comparison of data, but once that's done, the goal is really what we want to steer towards, and the baseline becomes, I think, less crucial because it's just helping us to quantify percentages. But what we're really looking at is what is the total emissions that we want to hit by 2030 or 2040 or 2050. So that we can have like static numbers. We want to be at X thousand tons.
I agree with you. The baseline is just a model. So yeah, and I understand that the data, the initial data we have is 2013. That's why you're starting from there, right?
Yes.
But even your goals, even the goals that you are proposing, they are not even linked to what the state has or the IPCC has. So I know this is a start, but I just want to make it clear that they are very lacking ambitious from what I read. That's my point of view. I know this is a start, but if we really think this is an emergency and that we need to do things, I think for me, what you are proposing is like a business as usual. Like you're really not, there's not a lot of transformational measures there. So for me, it's like if you're doing a business as usual, there's nothing. And I know we have to be realistic, but we also have to be to understand the emergency in which we are. That's what I think. I have some comments, but I'm gonna send them to you, written comments. But I just wanted to touch that before we finish.
Well, and the intent, and I'm totally, I mean, that's all great input. And, as far as I'm concerned, if we said we wanted to do 100% reduction by Tuesday, I'd be on board, right? That's why I do what I do. But the intent of the document is just to illustrate a picture. And then if the team we want to push this number up, then we understand that some of these statements in here about how many trees do we have to plant or how many homes do we have to get electrified or whatever, we can start tweaking those numbers so we understand how heavy of a lift that becomes in order to achieve different numbers, if that makes sense. So that's the intent of what's there now. Is it's a place to start the conversation and a way of trying to help link a goal to what kinds of action do we have to do in order to hit that goal. That's what we're just trying to provide now.
Perfect. Oh, well, thank you. So just before we move forward, I know we already finished, but if any of you have any comments for the assessment of the documents that Ted sent us, please send them to me and I'm gonna make sure he gets all our comments. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so, well, Ted, thank you very much for the presentation. I don't know if Grace wants to say, do you want to say anything else to Ted?
No, just thank you. And this is an ongoing conversation. This was a key check-in for us to present these baseline documents as the planning team kicks off developing goals based off of these documents. So it's really important for us to have this conversation this evening. Hilda was capturing your questions and comments as they came in. As she mentioned, please email them to her if you have others, as she is our liaison between this commission and the climate action planning team. So yeah, thank you, Ted. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
Ted.
you all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.
So our next presentation is MJ. I don't know if MJ, are you there?
Yes,
She might have just
sorry.
Great.
No, I'm here. It was just locked up on me as I was coming in. I am here. Grace, is your agenda long tonight?
We have a couple other check-ins beyond yours. Yes.
Okay, sounds good. So I will try to be as brief as possible, but I do want to allow you guys a chance to ask questions if you would like. Tonight, this year, we are doing what we're referring to as a member annual review. And so obviously our new members that are on the call tonight, they all went through like a general orientation. A lot of you maybe even remember your orientation. But it's pretty clear that sometimes as we get farther away from that onboarding session, that there are good reminders or things to talk through with commission members as well. So I'm going to every commission meeting, not just you guys. You guys are just my first one for May. So these, can you guys see my screen? Okay,
Yes.
So there's 4 main things I want to talk about tonight. The first 3 we should be able to move through very quickly, and then the last one I'd like to spend more time on if you guys have questions and want to talk further about it. But just a little bit of roles, communication with council, a little bit about guiding documents and update of what's been going on. That last item, which is really important, is the work plan development. A lot of these slides are actually slides that we've taken from past trainings and also our orientation, so you may recognize some of them. But as a reminder to our commissions and commissioners is that when we're working with council, you know, they are the group or the body that really decides that strategy and is our decision-making body. We're staff, we are managing operations and then advising council, and we're kind of that technical expertise. And so that's why you have Grace, who's your liaison, who brings that technical component to you. And then of course we have our commissions, that's all of you advising council and bringing that community perspective. And how that looks for us, like when we describe it, we use the IAP2 spectrum, which is the International Association for Public Participation. So our engagement of boards and commissions actually is a form of public participation or engagement of our community. So this is like a good snapshot of all the different type of techniques that we use when we do engagement or public participation. And as you guys can tell on the far right end, I don't know why it's not showing up, but there should be a circle actually around, oh wait. But over here is where our boards and commissions and task forces actually fall. So these are our advisory community groups. So the best way that we explained it, we just did this at a chair meeting, is council picked you guys. They didn't pick the other 54,900 and some people to be on the boards and commission. They picked you. And so what they're looking from you is you to bring that recommendation and that community perspective. Of course, there's always times that we can do more engagement, and of course we always will, especially with larger projects. But just a reminder that that is the role of our boards and commissions, and that is a form of engagement for the city of Edina. These are the 4 advisory groups that we have. The important thing for you guys to understand, of course, as a commission, you're always going to be an ongoing group. The other 3 groups are temporary in nature. The other thing that's important about these is who you actually are accountable to. Commissions, you guys are accountable to council. They actually appoint you. So that's where our work plans come into play and we get that direction. Subcommittees and working groups, they're accountable to you as a commission. That last task force, which is, we have them kind of in and out, just kind of depends on what type of group it actually is set up as. So some of the key roles, so you guys have your chair, Martinez. These on the left-hand side are all the things that she is responsible for as the chair, helping with preparing that agenda, leading the meetings that she's been doing, helping with the development of the annual work plan, member participation, making sure all voices are heard, and managing any areas of conflict, where Grace's role is supporting that chair in the agenda preparation and meeting materials, does all the official legal stuff. She's the technical expertise and actually is that connection to the city, and then also that connection to council. So those are kind of the differing how those roles kind of work together. The communication with council, we have 5 ways that we communicate with council. You obviously know all of these, your meeting minutes, they go to council. You have your work plan, it's approved by council. You have a joint work session with council. Staff reports, those are actually written by your staff liaison, and typically those are going to include any of the happenings from the meetings or on the projects in addition to the staff's recommendation. And so we just do this like check-in. Sometimes staff recommendations might be different than the recommendation of the commission, and that's Grace's job. It's not always to agree with the commission, but it's to bring her perspective on what might be an option that council should consider when they are looking at all the different options. Advisory communications, this is what's written by you, and I think you guys maybe have done one yet this year. Yep. So ideally, in an ideal world, these typically are prepared in advance of a meeting by a commission or commissioners, brought to the entire commission and then approved as a body. And then that's when it's turned over to city council. On occasion, I know that you guys sometimes have time sensitive information, and really the best way for us to deal with some of that time sensitivity is either a special meeting. We can call a special meeting, which is not against your attendance, but maybe a group of individuals gets together to talk about doing the advisory communication, or our liaisons, like having our liaisons help with doing some of that communication to council. So those are always you know, sometimes we can help with that stuff if we have time sensitivities. Just work on it with Grace. Here's your update on guiding documents. So city code was just updated, Article 3, which actually outlines all of the boards and commissions. We added some content and then removed. Specifically what we removed, because we used to have 4 guiding documents up here, is bylaws. So just at the last council meeting on Tuesday, council just rescinded the bylaws of all of our boards and commissions. So the content that was on those after we did a review essentially was a duplication of content that we had live in 2 other places, and we kept getting conflicting content because it was hard to keep up with all the different documents. So what council did is they had us update city code. We updated policies and procedures, which is our member handbook, primarily our member handbook that was included with tonight's packet, right, Grace? Yep. So that on an annual basis is updated, and we might do something similar to this where we send it to you, come and talk to you. And then that 3rd guiding document for our commissions is going to be that work plan. That is the work that's approved by council and what they're asking you to work on. All right, I'm going to pause here for a moment. Are there any questions about any of the first part of this? No, I'm getting ahead. Okay. All right, then let's talk a little bit more about work plans, because this is great timing for us to do this review, because you are about to actually start establishing your next work plan. This is where our calendar, this is what it looks like. They start in January, so our new members, you guys came on and you basically were given a work plan to start helping to work on. But now we're at the point where it's time to talk about what we're going to do for 2022. And I know that we're only halfway in the year, but it's going to take you guys some time to develop it because you only meet once a month. So in June, expect Grace to be putting, 2021 work plan discussion on your agenda, and you guys will start brainstorming and talking about the different ideas of things you want to do. Come July, you're going to see those things popping up on the template. We'll have our work plan template, and she'll start filling in some of those fields for you, and you'll need to come to do some more clarification. By August, you pretty much should have your full work plan pretty much done, because you really just need to sign off and approve it as a commission body. So you're going to want to start thinking about that and try to get as much done in those first 2 months, so that August, you don't feel like there's as much to actually resolve or discuss for that evening. Then Hilda will actually have some responsibilities following that to do some presentations, and eventually you'll get your approved work plan back to you in December, and you'll start it all over again. I like to always say I feel like a hamster in a wheel sometimes with boards and commissions. I just keep doing this process every year. So these are the roles. So
okay, can I ask you a question before you? Can you go back to the next one? So when we last year, when we were discussing this is just an idea. I'm not saying we should do it, but I'm asking if eventually we reach to that point, if we can do it. When we were working on the work plan, we had, since we only have 1 meeting a month, they were very long meetings. Some of them, they were like 3 hours or so. Is there a way that maybe we can meet for a second time in the month to, this is a suggestion. I haven't even discussed it with them, but since you're here and sometimes I guess you decide those things, if there is a way or no, it's
Yep.
not. So we just have it in mind eventually if we found it ourselves in that situation.
Yep, so that would be called a special meeting, and you guys can decide, you would have to make an action to establish that special meeting. And then Grace would take care of the legal requirements around it. Just so you guys know, it doesn't count against attendance. So if for some reason you couldn't all make it, that wouldn't count against you. But you couldn't take any action if you didn't have a quorum. And you may not. I mean, the time that I remember that we actually called some special meetings as commissions was around the comprehensive plan. And the reason we called those special meetings because we needed time to work. So this sounds more like you guys want time to work together versus actually needing to take action on items. And so it probably wouldn't be such a big deal if you even didn't have quorum as well. The other option is you could consider just extending your meeting starting earlier as well. Some of the commissions opt to do that. And planning commission, they call it like a work session. So you could do like a special meeting at the beginning as a work development work session or something of that nature as well. You guys talk about that and then you'll have to figure that out as a group. And
yeah, we haven't even discussed it. Just wanted to know what options were on the table.
Yep,
okay,
you got it.
Thank you.
And you guys, I think did your meeting get changed because of 4th of July?
Our July meeting is the same as it was. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds
It's
good.
the 8th.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so your work plan development, the roles, just so you guys understand, you have obviously your chair, Martinez, who's going to help with leading that work plan development and making sure the work plan we say is not overloaded. We want to try to keep it realistic and that there's enough work to keep you busy for the year, but also enough to actually be able to complete it for the year. And then again, Chair Martinez will come and she'll actually present this, the proposed work plan to City Council. Grace, she's going to provide you that technical expertise and recommendations and advice. So she's going to give, she's going to be very clear. She's going to help you in managing it and then being upfront with you guys about expectations, resources, etc. And then making sure that all the pieces in the template get turned in at the right time so that we can actually pass them off to council as well. This next slide, these are actually the bolder, the bigger font is actually a field that exists on your template, your work plan template. And these are just some tips. So things for you guys to think about as you go into your work plan development. There's that, of course, the title and what we always say, the clearer and the more detail you can give, the better. It's very challenging for us when we're reading them and we're like, I don't know exactly what they're trying to say they want to do. And so it becomes almost difficult and for us to navigate some of that. And we have to go back forth and talking to different liaisons to try to decipher it. So when you're writing those, try to think about how they're written. The outcome, so this is a new field that we started last year, but like at the end, what is the final outcome? So if it is holding an event, the outcome is the event. If it's doing some research, the outcome would be a report to council with all that research and findings. So that also helps us understand a little bit better of when we have that title of that initiative. There is a budget, and the important part for you guys to know about this budget is that it's more for us and council to understand that if a commission is asking for a budget, if it's significant or not significant, and how that may impact our department budgets. We don't have budgets specific for commissions. It's actually all out of our departments, and by law, you guys as volunteers are not able to actually approve spending of money. It has to be staff, and so you basically are making kind of a request, and when it comes up, you make that request through your staff liaison who works with the department to figure out what's feasible or not feasible, if that makes sense. Liaison comments, I talked a little bit about this in the last slide. Grace is going to actually put in her comments into the work plan. but none of it should be a surprise. It should be all content that you guys have been receiving from her as you guys have been working on the development of your work plan. It's important that you guys check in with her on those items and definitely find out what her comments are, because she's going to be the person who's really going to help you figure out some of those ins and outs as far as connecting with the city, if there's other things that are going on that may overlap. And so definitely checking in with her on your work plan initiatives is going to be important. Target completion, we say be realistic. Like try to stick to the as much as possible. If you can. A lot of times, if it's something that you're not exactly sure when it's going to be completed through the year, some people say like the end of the year, but just give us a realistic timeline, because it does, where it impacts us the most is like staff. If it's something that hinges on our work or with our work or our supporting departments, so like communications, if you guys do an event and we think we have like a brochure or something you're going to take on the plan, and then all of a sudden it doesn't happen, or it happens 5 months later, it kind of throws our schedule and what we're planning on working on and supporting the commission. So last one, the partner projects. So you guys have experienced this in the past, is that sometimes there are some cross commission work or other external agencies that might want to partner with us to do the work. The best way that these work, which we've learned, is that if there is 2 commissions, that one commission is the lead and the other commission is the support, where typically they're doing a review and comment. So basically the supporting, the lead does the work, they send it to the support provides some feedback that goes back to the lead, and the lead actually finishes the final outcome of that initiative. Sometimes this happens like mid-year where commissioners will start talking. No big deal. Hold those ideas and then start talking about them at the work plan development. And then think about workload. Like sometimes it's been where one commission has thought that they would lead it, but their work plan was so big that it made sense to have a different commission lead it, but to allow this other commission to support it. So when we look at work plans, keep in mind, we're not looking at just your work plan, we're looking at all of the work plans and how all of those play into the work. So that's a little bit about when we have those cross commissions. So that's pretty much it, and what I wanted to talk to you guys about related to work plan. But do you have questions? Because I mean, after this meeting or next meeting, you're going to kind of go into it. No, they're ready, Grace Bayardo.
So MJ, I understand the next meeting is when we have to, we need to start like doing you know, bring up the ideas for our work plan, right? To start developing them.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Well,
okay.
Gladly, Hilda. You still have Michelle and me on the commission, and also Anna, which was the present last year. And we can try to help out as much as we can. I know that we have the parking lot still available, and those are some of the ideas that we want to, you know, if they weren't on the work plan for this year, or if for any reason we weren't able to complete any of the work plan, we might want to just go ahead and push it to the next one, or bring some of the parking lot items into the work plan. So we don't have a blank slate to work from. We actually have some information ready to go and to kind of ease along the process.
And you have, you know, a couple new commissioners. Well, actually, several new commissioners, and they might have some new ideas, things that they want to work on. It's going to be important, though, that when you put an item on on the work plan, somebody needs to kind of take the lead of it.
Yeah. No. Yes. No. Thank you. Just so like everybody knows that maybe for the next meeting we need to either revise the parking lot or bring new ideas so we can start discussing them for work plan.
Okay, well, oh yeah, John.
Yeah, I have one question. So we were just sent the work plans for this commission from 2015 to 2019, and looking through that, there are some items that from my perspective hadn't been necessarily resolved or brought forth. Is it on the, can we bring those old work plan items forward if nothing's happened at the city? Is that okay, or is that because it's been brought before? Okay.
You can. You guys are a good example of trying to make sure that work plans are not overloaded. Because some of those items, I think there wasn't time. Maybe Michelle can even give you some background capacity or things fell through. So when we give you the work plan, I mean, it's kind of the or when council gives you their approved work plan, it's up to you guys to really complete the work. We're not there's nothing we do to hold you accountable to say you have to do it. And so it's that's why you develop it, propose it. Sometimes council will give you something that they feel is priority and they want you to work on, but it's then up to you guys to actually complete the work.
And there's no rule against doing things again or adding.
There's not, John.
Alright.
No, if it would be specific when you write that of the why are we looking at this again? And then think about legal considerations, because I know that that's come up a few times. We don't want you to try to tackle things that have some legal barriers that we can't get around, or any like things that are out of our control, external agencies or factors that we, again, we got to stick within what's in our locus of control.
Of course, yep.
Okay, send your questions to Grace because she's got the answers. You don't need me.
Okay, thank you, Andre.
All right, you guys have a good night.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, MJ.
Thanks, MJ.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we still have not a long agenda, but we still have several things to discuss. So item number 6, it's reports and recommendation and has to do with the work plan. Initiative number A, it's gonna be covered by Michelle. Michelle is gonna talk a little bit about the state of initiative number 2 that has to do with the to-go packaging, and initiative number 5 that has to go to do with the Green Business Recognition Program. So Michelle.
And Michelle, I'll just mention that the commission did receive your written comments on these initiatives. So if you have more updates, obviously we want to hear them, but if not, folks have these updates in the written form since there was nothing action related this time.
Okay, yeah, so if we want to save time, then you guys can just read my brief comments that were included in the package.
Okay, so does anybody has comments for Michelle or? Okay, so the next initiative has to do with initiative number 3, which is the tabling events that it's been led by Bayardo. So Bayardo, could you give us an update?
Yeah, I reached out to Twyla, and we are pretty much set to start with the farmers markets, and pending on July 4th event and also fair. So we're just kind of, she obviously has the budget I don't have, so she can request all the materials and things we would need for tabling and engaging with the community at all the events. So good.
So for that tabling, will you be needing volunteers? Like, what you're expecting? You're expecting?
Yes.
Do you do all the tabling, or do you want volunteers?
I would love to have volunteers there. I am not sure that I can make every single week from here till November.
Okay. No, that's what I'm asking. So my suggestion could be we're starting in what, in June or July? Is it when we started?
June.
June. Do you remember the date? Is it before our meeting?
It is before the meeting, yeah.
Okay, so can you share with us maybe, what can we do, Grace? Can he share with us maybe a table and that maybe with the dates of the farmer markets, and see which one of us wants to volunteer for which date?
Yes.
And
the easiest way to do it to avoid open meeting laws is Bayardo, if you want to create like a Google Doc or something like that, send me the link and I can share it with the full EEC for folks to sign up.
Yes, ma'am. Then also probably the other best thing is also to try to reach out to see if, I don't know again how things are limited or not, to have some of the students from the high school come over and help out. They're usually the ones that are most available, and because it is pretty early in the afternoon.
Anna can help you with that.
Yeah, for
trying
sure.
to
That's
see.
actually, I was gonna ask you
And
about
to
that.
similar student commissioners also, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people for a project there would be willing to do it. But also like I had another, like that was one of my questions, but I had another question, like, is it just gonna be focused on like raising awareness, or not raising awareness, but like education, like in terms of composting, or are we gonna, because I remember like I think from like what we had in the like our plan, it was gonna be like from like about other topics too, but I don't know if we like
So Twyla will be hosting different topics. I think as far as the EEC, us supporting her at the events will be mostly directed with organics and try to, I guess, bring up any other relevant information with the EEC.
Okay. Well, there's this girl who I think, I mean, you probably remember her. She was the girl I presented, like I like made my presentation with, like I think 2 years ago. Her name's Catherine, and she goes to Blake, and she was like, she's been like starting this project with, I think, like an organization called Youth Environmental Activist. I think that's what it's called, I'm pretty sure. And then she's, I think, focusing on like water quality, and she wanted to like try to get the commission to like start like an education program of some sort. And I told her that maybe like a good idea would be to like well, like that I could ask if we could like incorporate it as part of like our summer like tabling events. Do you think that's a like could we potentially do that, or should I reach out to Twyla and ask? Or
that might actually be something to reach out to MJ about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Rather than Twyla. Twyla's more directly involved with the
posting,
like the operations of things, and MJ's more of the engagement and community person. So definitely, you know, maybe Grace can help us reach out to MJ and see what can come out of that.
Yeah, Anna, I'm happy to send an email to MJ about topics that the EEC can take on for the tabling. Yep.
And just sorry, one more question. The email you sent, I think you sent it to me and Peter about helping out with like getting young people, or just like students and young people in general, to share their stories. Is that through the farmers market too, or is that like a separate thing?
No, and I'll say it broadly for the group. And Terry, yes, I noted your chat just now that battery's running low. Feel free to drop as you need to. Yes, so we have some flexibility in the tabling at the farmers market. Organics was the focus last year. Twyla continues to have resources, so I think that's the leading topic. But we do have the Emerging Climate Action Plan and the Youth Strategy specifically, which has the storytelling initiative that Ted mentioned. So I had emailed Anna and Peter about potentially acting as interviewers for this storytelling project at the farmers market. The city could give you would supply an iPad or a microphone, maybe some interview prompts. So yes, that is another way that we're thinking about using these tabling opportunities. And that could be open not only to the student commissioners, but other youth. Anna, you mentioned Project Earth or other groups like that who could act as interviewers.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Bayardo. So the next item, it has to do with initiative number 7, which is the organized trash collection that's been led by the Transportation Commission. And John is going to talk briefly about the report that we received from them, talking about the work they have done so far. So, John.
Yes. So ETC has a work plan item to evaluate trash collection. Currently, we have 6 licensed haulers in the city. I'm sure all of you see this weekly, lots of redundant trips on your block. The increased wear and tear on the streets, the increased particulate emission from the tailpipes, increased climate pollution, GHG emissions. You know, I think that all of us kind of probably recognize the innate environmental issues with this. I think seemingly the one benefit, or at least in theory, the one benefit would be increased competition through reduced prices and potentially improved service or, you know, accountability. But I personally haven't observed that, and I've spoken with some folks about it and haven't heard like that pricing is a resounding success at this point, and that service levels tend to vary regardless of price. So ETC, I don't actually know what the work plan specific item is. I've not received any information on that. What they've told us is they're working with a student group from Minnetonka High School that is going to prepare a report that benchmarks Edina's current program with neighboring cities. They're also at some point, not disclosed, working on a survey to launch on Nextdoor. It's a little skeptical about that, given the lack of parameters there, and they need to wrap by May because that's when the student group's semester is up. The one other thing to note is the 2016 work plan for this commission had research and report on the alternatives for reorganizing the manner in which solid waste is collected from single-family homes in Edina. I'd be curious if there were any conclusions from that, if anyone remembers that, or if there's any paper trail on additional items within that, or reports or memos. The questions I have that I will be including in comment submission to ETC and potentially via Grace. I'm not sure how to do that, but what is the actual item on the work plan for the Transportation Commission? When will this survey go out via Nextdoor? And beyond the student project, what is the next step after that report is done? Does every hauler bring the trash to the Hennepin Energy Recovery Center, or where is the endpoint for each of these haulers? Because that could actually impact the seeming environmental benefit of where our trash ends up. And then finally, I think it'd be really useful to get a list of current prices for a similar size receptacle, and also a sense of the number of customers each hauler has to gauge, who's actually competing here, who has a major role here, and who doesn't. So I think I'll be asking for some of that data. Not sure if the city does collect that, but I think it'd be really useful to have. So those are my comments and questions. Love to hear yours.
So does anybody has questions about the report or what John just presented?
So I actually can't remember what came of. I can't remember if I came on, I think after or that year, 2016 maybe, if that was on there. So just some history on organized hauling. Like when I first, I was on the recycling and solid waste and organics working group. And at that time we actually had liaisons, staff liaisons, and we had the city, whatever Scott Neal is his position, came and talked to us, and organized hauling was like a bad word. Like you just didn't say it out loud. It was so it was ugly. Like when people who at that time who worked in the city have vivid recollections of the fights in other cities. Like I think Plymouth was an ugly fight that the city lost on that. So the fact that we're talking about it out loud as a city is a really great sign, but just to know that it's something cities did not want to get into. Not waste management, but haulers would basically rev up their base to revolt against organized hauling. So so that's kind of the background, is that cities saw it as toxic. But now that we've got Bloomington that's passed it, and St. Paul that, through a vote by the citizens have kept it in, it's all positive. But I think, yeah, in the past they didn't want to touch it. They just didn't want to touch it. So.
Yeah, John, I was not in the commission at that time, but I know it's been almost a taboo because of uphill battle with other cities, as perfect example, like Michelle said. But ideally, it would be one of the best things as far as greenhouse gases and reduction of vehicles on the road, to have the city and its residents vote that into a ordinance or whatever, and maybe I'm not even sure what they would call it. But I think definitely there has to be leadership coming from council to make that a thing. If council doesn't really want to get behind it, then all these studies are kind of a waste of time, to be honest. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is, ask transportation committee, what is the city willing to do to make this a reality or not? Because if the city's not behind it, then it's just going to be a report.
So what I understand, and I'm not very familiar, is that the commission is not involved, right? It's just a leader of it's the liaison of transportation, the one that asked for the study, or is it the commission that asked for that study? Is not clear for me. And also, as you mentioned, I think they should have the report ready by May, right? So as soon as they have it, they should have a plan. So what are the next steps on, if I understand correctly, the dates that you gave, right?
My understanding is that the high school students will be preparing a report at the end, at some time to coincide with the end of their semester in May. But the memo from the staff liaison didn't really have anything beyond that and on a time horizon, and honestly didn't really have next steps after that. So it is pretty unclear what the next thing is beyond the high school students preparing a report, which I'm assuming there has to be something beyond that. But don't really have a sense of what that is.
So yes, Grace, as I mentioned, I guess in one of my mails, like, how can we get more involved? Because really, I'm as lost as John, because I know he's leading it, but I read the report and it doesn't said much. And if we're not involved, it's a little bit difficult to have a clear participation, besides just presenting here the report that it doesn't said much.
Yeah, so MJ kind of touched on the difficulty of cross-commission initiatives, but it is a challenge that the city continues to grapple with. We see this with environment, with our climate action plan, that the concerns intersect with many other concerns. And so in the past, including this year, the council has assigned a lead commission and a reviewing commission. In the case of organized trash, ETC is leading, EEC is reviewing and commenting. So the commission is really at the mercy of the Transportation Commission's progress. This is one item, and I'll say more about this in my staff comments. You might have it on your chair comments, Hilda, but on June 15th, the EEC has a work session with council to provide updates on progress on our work plan. This is the kind of question that's good to put to council, to say this process, to elevate your questions about process to council and see what their thoughts are about going forward on these kinds of initiatives and how commissions can partner. But right now, EEC is the responding commission in this case.
Does that preclude us from getting basic information on what's on their work plan and what their plan, like what that might look like, progress, milestones? Like, is there a way for me as the lead on this to speak with the lead from that group, or is that not allowed? I guess I'm trying to understand like how we can help get this unstuck without having to just wait until June 15th.
Yeah, so a couple things. The ETC work plan is available on Edina's website, and I pulled it up. I'm going to put this, I'll read it, and I'm going to put this work plan item in the chat.
Great, thank you.
As well. But their work plan item says, investigate the impacts of organized trash collection while considering the travel demand management objectives environmental goals, and reducing wear and tear on city streets. And this is a review and recommend a decision for city council is their objective.
Is
Yes,
it clear that what that review and recommend is, I mean, is it like recommending another report, recommending a different strategy? Is there, or do they have latitude to select an output there?
their deliverable is a report to council. What's
Got
in
it.
that report is up to them.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, and yes, you can reach out to the lead for this informally on ETC side. Generally, the preference is that you go through liaisons, so
Sure.
you don't have to wait on meeting dates. But best practice is to work through liaisons. I can't stop you if you go.
No,
go
that's
check out.
totally fine. Makes sense.
Mel?
So the positive thing about that work plan is that it's a review and recommend. A lot of times your charge will be review and report, or so you do, like, I think it's a really positive sign that they're actually asking for the Transportation Commission, and I don't know if we have input, but to recommend. Like I said, a lot of times you don't get that opportunity to report. You know, they just want to, council just wants to report. So I think that's a really positive direction that council is giving them. So.
Yeah, I think our participation is to revise that report, right? Is that what I understand? That's where we raise or not? That's why I guess that's why it's a joint initiative, right? Or not?
I'd say at the very least, EEC would expect to be able to comment on the final report. I'm unsure about how much the EEC should expect to comment on the process toward that report.
Makes sense.
Okay. Oh,
Any
It's
other
not a
feedback?
bad thing that we don't have to do a lot of work. Like, this is a positive.
oh,
And if we don't like the report or outcome, we can add it to our work plan for next year. Do it ourselves.
okay, well, thank you, John.
Thank you.
So our next item is chair and members' comments. In that item, we include a brief history of the EEC and context. Michelle helped us build a small document. So I don't know if you want to briefly present it. I know it's there. I revised it. I don't know if any of you had the chance to revise it, but I don't know if you want to talk a little bit brief about it, Michelle.
I don't know. Does anybody have any questions on it? I mean, like I said, it doesn't make any sense for me to read it, but I just thought just kind of and maybe some of the things I could just mention of just things that have happened that maybe, like you said, that are on work plans that all of a sudden nothing really happened. And I think there were three, the to-go packaging, that was kind of tabled. The plastic bag, again, we've had reports that were sent to council and they either said to table it or, just they weren't ready to look at it. That's what happened with both, like I said, the packaging report and the plastic bag report. Packaging had to do with we didn't have a curbside organics program. We felt it would be more effective if we had organics before having a packaging ordinance. So that's why now they're showing back up. But I don't know, does anybody have any questions about anything? Again, I kind of just spelled it out because I knew it was going to be a long meeting and nobody needs to hear me talk if it's written down. So.
No, but thank you very much for doing
That's
that.
very helpful, Michelle.
History, yeah, I
Yes,
guess.
thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
I would just say that if you would be able to bring any like a punch list or a list of bullet points on things you think that the commission could have done more thoroughly at some point during those work plans, I'd be very receptive to your perspective on that, because I think we can all you know, those of us who are new can all read that and come up with our own opinions. But certainly having been in the room, I think you, Bayardo, and Hilda, and you know, anyone else who's been involved with those, would be, your opinions would be more significant than my opinions on that, in terms of like deciding what goes onto a future work plan, or at least I would respect those pretty significantly. So
one thing I will say is that I have to admit it felt very much like we were spinning our wheels. We'd get so far and then we wouldn't get anywhere, and it just seemed like things would happen and then nothing would happen. And a lot was that it's been very recent since we've had a sustainability coordinator.
Mhm.
And since Tara was on and now with Grace, it has really been helpful. Because, we had no really power as a commission, and it's hard to get, because the staff has got a ton of stuff to do. And so that's when we really saw things happening. And so then now Grace is in a position where she can, infiltrate the whole city. And that was the one piece, is we felt like we were in this one silo, and we wanted the city to look at everything they did through the lens of the environment. And that wasn't able to happen until we got Tara on. And that was a big push to find the money for a coordinator. So that was done from the commission. That was pressure by the commission. But yeah, it seemed like we were doing a lot of stuff and getting stuck. But we just didn't have the right people. And like I said, staff has got a lot of stuff to do. And so it's always trying to be respectful of their time too, because they've got a full plate. So things have been moving a lot quicker, and also we're in a spot where just environmental issues are just more in the forefront. People are, we were, the commission, when I first came on, we just had, just the environment was more of taboo of a word. Like, we couldn't say climate change as easily as we can now. And that's just in general, right? So everybody's more receptive. Like I said, right now, I think people in the council, last year we were at a meeting, and the commissioner, who's not on anymore, or the council member, but he said out loud at a meeting, we should be looking at organized hauling. So I think we're also, not only was it, I just think people are more open to these ideas. It's, so I think the fact that you look and see there's a lot of things that didn't happen on work plans back then was because of the times we were in, and the lack of this right staff to help us get to where we are. And so now I feel like we're in a really good position. So I don't know if that helps, but
yeah, that's really helpful. Yep.
you can send me any further questions if you have, or contact me. But
Bayardo? I thought, no?
Yeah, same here. If I can help you with anything, please let me know.
Okay, perfect. So anybody else has further comments, not regarding the working plan, anything that you want to comment in this section? Well, just briefly, as Grace already mentioned, I'm going, after our June meeting, I'm presenting to the City Council an update of the working plan. So we will meet before that, and then we will have to start working on the next year work plan. So I suggest that, as John mentioned, he has been going through the previous work plans, and I guess you have already identified what initiatives we can work on. So I suggest that the rest of you also bring either revise the parking lot that we have, or other new ideas, because eventually last year we have, I think, I think it was 12 of them, and we end up with 7. So I guess we can discuss them, and then we can summarize it in 7 or 8 initiatives. So just bring that for our next meeting. Yes, Tom?
Hilda, what is the date of your presentation to the council? If we wanted to watch that.
15th of June. I
Okay.
think it's 6:30. And I think the link is on the webpage. Is that correct, Rice? Yes.
Yes,
Thank
it
you.
is. Yeah, it is the council work session, so it isn't the public-facing meeting, and it's from 5:30 to 6:30. All commission members are invited as optional attendees, but it will be Chair Martinez who is presenting.
And Grace, how much time will Chair Martinez have to really comment? It's not long, right?
It's not long. It's 30 minutes total for the work, for presentation and council discussion. So we typically say split it, 15-15.
Okay. So
Excellent. Thank you.
okay, so that's for anybody else have comments? Okay, so our next item is number 8, which is staff comments. So Grace, I don't know if you have any comments for us.
Just a couple this evening. I'll get you out by 9. So I wanted to remind everyone that student commissioner positions are open, and they are open until June 1st. So if you know a student who might be interested in serving on any commission, not only the Energy and Environment Commission, encourage them to apply. For our students who are not graduating this year, they're invited to reapply. We know how much value our youth commissioners bring. So keep that in mind. Information on the website in the volunteer section. I also wanted to mention that the city holds public conversations, which are called town talks, on a quarterly basis. You might have attended one in the past on organics, recycling, or affordable housing. Sustainability is giving one on May 19th. So I will be presenting for an hour at 7 p.m. on May 19th on sustainability initiatives in Edina, as well as the climate action plan. So that is a conversation moderated by our city manager, Scott Neal. There's a Q&A time. I encourage you all to attend, although it will be a lot of familiar topics. And then I wanted to thank everyone who completed the Google Slides. I hope that's helpful for you all to get to know each other a little bit. I know it's difficult in this virtual world without informal conversation. So that will stay live as a reference document for everybody. So keep that in mind. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that the Edina Art Festival, which is happening in September this year, is on. It is smaller this year than in past years. And I think that maybe Commissioner Haran had sent me an email about what it would take to make the art festival a zero waste event, or moving to zero. So I had a conversation with our Art Center Director who leads this festival, as well as our Organics Recycling Coordinator, Twyla, about this. And there is an opportunity for us to provide a robust organics and regular recycling option at the art festival. This would be something where Twyla would lead, but invite the EEC to robustly participate. So keep that in mind. If it becomes, I'll work with Chair Martinez on some of the details on that. If it's something the EEC expresses interest in being a part of, this might be one way that the work plan gets revised at the June 15th presentation to council to take this kind of thing on. So that's in the works on the staff side. We would welcome the EEC participation. I'll work with Chair Martinez ahead of the June meeting to finalize details on participation on that.
Grace, can you repeat the dates of the festival, or you still don't have them?
No, I believe the festival dates are September 11th and 12th, a Saturday and Sunday. Michelle.
So I think this would be a great opportunity. As you know, we're bringing this to-go ordinance up. I think this would be a great opportunity for EEC to be really involved, just to kind of support. This is what we would be doing with the ordinance. So I think if we can support that, it helps our initiative of this ordinance.
So Grace, if we decide to move on this one, we need to present this to the council as a new initiative, or can we include it on the tabling initiative? Or
I think it could fit into the tabling initiative for simplicity's sake. It might be something I run by MJ just to confirm, but considering our partner, it's still running completely through or most directly through Twyla. The EEC would have the option to have a table at the art festival. So I think we could probably couch it within an existing work plan item.
Yeah, but I understand this is besides the tabling, right? We will try to like to the providers that are participating in the art festival, we would like them to be, I don't know, compostable packaging, or that's that's what we want, right?
That's the questions. Those are some of the questions that are on the table. So Twyla is writing a proposal to the art festival board to say this is what we would like to see on a zero waste event. What would they be willing to agree to? And then she will bring that through me or directly to the EEC. So it could be as simple as volunteers to staff the waste bins to help educate people as they dispose of their waste, and also to prevent contamination. Have a table that has activities, make art out of trash or something like that. And it could be as robust as requiring food vendors to use compostable, or at least requesting that food vendors use compostable items. But it's a little TBD.
So is there any way that we can participate with Twyla in the proposal, or like not just she giving the feedback and then telling us, oh, you need to do this, like maybe giving her like some feedback for the proposal?
Yes. So I can so you can certainly see the proposal and provide feedback as a group at your June 10th meeting. I think that, does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll make sure I'll make sure that comes to us for you all to comment in time to discuss on June 10th. Yeah.
Can she, I know it's kind of ahead of things, but can she mention in her proposal that we are having this ordinance and that, it's kind of coming down the pike anyways? Maybe, we don't know that, but if she could maybe mention it as a possibility.
It's an open secret. I think she can mention it. I'll suggest that to her.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks.
Perfect. So anything else, Grace, or?
Nothing from me. Thank you all for hanging in there.
Hey, Grace, just a quick question. With the governor's announcements this week around like COVID restrictions lifting, has there been any talk at City Hall about implications on in-person meetings and stuff over the summer? What's the thought?
Not yet. There has been no formal announcement. I expect one will come. Council just met this week on Tuesday, so they will not meet again for 2 weeks, but we might hear something from the city manager ahead of then. I know that outdoor meetings, outdoor events are opening up. The farmers market is a perfect example, but we haven't received formal guidance on indoor meetings yet, so stay tuned.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no more comments, I will suggest to adjourn the meeting. So does anybody wants to call? Okay, I'll call it. Anybody wants to second?
Second.
Okay, so Grace, can you do that roll calling, please?
Yes, Commissioner Haugen.
Aye.
Commissioner Haran.
Aye.
Commissioner Hovanek. Commissioner Lanzis.
Aye.
Commissioner Lukens.
Aye.
Chair Martinez.
Aye.
Commissioner Tessman.
Aye.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your evening and see you in a month. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Great. I have